Okay, good afternoon and good evening, everybody. My name is Pete Marsh. I'm one of the 4 co-leads of the Electrification Action Team, and welcome to our second workshop in a series of workshops on engaging in our communities and building coalitions to help our communities go electric, and especially in a policy sense. We want really to enable and empower CCL chapters around the country to feel good about going out and engaging with our elected officials and staffs and other community-based organizations. So with that, I'll go ahead and kick things right off. Mark Friedman, one of our other co-hosts, is going to share the deck, and let's see. So I dropped a note into the chat already, but if you haven't seen that, we'd love to have you introduce yourself, your name, city and state, your CCL chapter or another nonprofit organization or company if you're with one. And we'd love to have your email address for follow-up. And as we're going through, please make it interactive. Please drop your questions into the chat. And those of us who are not presenting at the moment, we'll answer as many as we can. And audience, please chime in with your answers as well. One of the things we're most excited about and learning most in this series is that everybody, a lot of CCL chapters around the country are actively engaged already in community outreach. So share your stories and successes. All right. So Mark has the slide deck up. Thank you, Mark. And I think the very first set of slides is going to be Jay Bassett talking about funding sources, correct? So, oh, I know, I have a couple of pieces of introduction. So thank you, Mark. Sorry about that. So today's workshop is an overview of what we're calling our resource toolkit, which is essentially, it's a curated repository online of resources about electrification. We're not trying to prepare new original content ourselves in CCL, but rather link out to the many other respected decarbonization groups that are already doing stuff like that. So we're going to zoom through the resource toolkit today. Jay will start us off with sources of funding, and then go back one, if you would, please, Mark. Thank you for the anticipation. But the sequence here helped me get it right. Mark is going to talk us through a template for presentations to governments and buildings, and he's already got a success story based on this template in San Diego. He will also talk about model reach codes or building codes. Michael will talk with us about municipal ordinances of other types beyond reach codes, and I'll finish it up with school districts. So with that, go ahead, Mark. Here's sort of a cutesy overview. We'll click into each of these sections of the resource toolkit as we go through. Next slide. And with that, Jay, the floor is yours.
Hey, y'all. Good to be here today. Jay Bassett here. And maybe as we get started, first of all, just wish everyone a great Earth Day. And since we are talking about federal funding sources, and I think I was able to put a little bit in here, there was actually a historic announcement today. That was the greenhouse gas reduction solar for all awardees were announced today. And I'll talk a little bit about how that plays in federal funding and coalition here in just a little bit. So Mark, if you don't mind going to the next slide. So what I thought I'd do, just to tell you, first of all, you don't have to be too jazzed by this chart, but what I do want you to see out of this chart is that government, from the federal perspective, that there are a real concerted effort of bringing climate funding down, and if you look in a circle, to the community level through directly from federal to community and local governments. And there's 2 different ways that that's going about doing that. One is bringing actual climate funding. In this case, this chart is from EPA itself on what they're doing on climate funding. And you've probably heard the term maybe of what they call Justice 40. That means that 40% of the benefits from the Inflation Reduction Act and BIL are supposed to go to overburdened and underserved communities. And this is a mechanism through the climate funding of having this focus at community, which really works to our benefit of being able to look at from a coalition perspective of where CCL with others or as part of others can access some of the federal funding with the idea of communities and us being in the center. And that EPA is actually thinking about these things, just like Department of Energy is, USDA and its Rural Economic Development Program, as well as other things like Brownsfield and the Clean School Bus Program or mobile sources of how these things kind of fit together of building capacity as well as accessing significant funding that is just now coming out the door. So in the resource guide, what you'll see in there is a list of federal funding opportunities that align not just from EPA, but also Department of Energy and some other ones, but kind of fit this matrix I'm showing you of building capacity from community level up to be able to take advantage of the big funding that's coming down through DOE and EPA. So I'm going to spend the rest of this presentation, my time, giving you some updates as to real term of what money is flowing down that you can take advantage of. Go to the next. So the first thing I want you to be aware of is there is money out there that's being used for capacity building that particularly if you're working with community-based non-governmental organizations or with local governments to be able to build some capacity of being able to apply for and access grants, as well as actually do some actual clean energy transition. And the two big ones out there is there's a technical assistance and capacity building, what they call the Thriving Communities Technical Assistance Centers. But maybe more importantly underneath that is the Environmental Justice Thriving Communities Grant Maker Grant Program, where they can actually do grants on behalf of the government for assessment, planning, and project development for clean energy projects as part of building advocacy that kind of fits with electrification, building efficiency, and affordable housing. Those were awarded back in December and are just now becoming available for subrecipients. So if you're working with small community-based organizations that particularly represent Justice 40, those are the type of entities that are available to be able to access about 750,000 of capacity building money to be able to do that. And then the other one is the $2 billion in Inflation Reduction Act for the community change grants. That is an open competition that community-based organizations in partnership with another community-based organization, in partnership with a local government, or in partnership with a higher ed institution can apply for, that can actually do actual projects, community-driven projects, and infrastructure and put it in place in communities to advance clean energy transition. That's open through November of this year. It's on a rolling basis. Go to the next. So I did want to point out that, as I mentioned today, one of the other big funders out there is the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund. That wasn't on that chart I showed you, but it's another one that ties directly to the climate pollution reduction grants. And the first two in there are the investment fund accelerator competitions that were announced a couple of weeks ago. We'll talk about that here in a minute, but that is 20 billion. That also brings about another 100 billion of private equity to be able to do financing and investment at the community level for building electrification, residential electrification, and clean energy transition. The last one is the solar for all. All right, go to the next. So what I want to do is just real quick stop right here on this and just give you an update of kind of where things are at right now. One of the things I just want to highlight that the greenhouse gas reduction investments that were announced a few weeks ago, as well as the solar for all today, really aligned underneath are part of the climate pollution reduction grants. And that you saw on the chart. And the key thing I want you to know with that is that in 1 March, for 45 of 50 states and about 70 of the largest metro areas had to submit a climate action plan. So that was the non-competitive piece. So if you go to that link in there where it says state and metro, and those are priority climate action plans, you have access to all the climate action plans that have been submitted to EPA that make that communities and municipal governments in partnership with communities can apply for implementation funds to do projects against those plans. So those plans were submitted 1 March. They are posted. They are what they call priority climate action plans. So the intent is between now and 2025, those same entities that did the priority climate action plan will be doing a final climate action plan. So it's an opportunity for the coalitions we built to actually influence and continue to refine and add projects that align with our priorities, particularly around building electrification and building efficiency and building system performance. The other thing is, and those were announced on March the 11th, the other thing is there's implementation grants. The first round of that was due on April the 1st. Those haven't been posted yet in terms of those things being reviewed. Not sure when they will be posted. There may be some folks that were part of a coalition that applied for an implementation grant for the $4.6 billion that have to be aligned with the climate action plans. But there'll be a second round that'll be coming out probably in the fall. And so that's another coalition opportunity to both shape the climate action plans and be positioned as in coalition with others, with a local government or a municipality to be able to apply for a implementation grant for round 2. Go to the next. So I mentioned the greenhouse gas reduction investment funds. I just want to highlight 2 of them that were announced and say why these are opportunities for us. One was the Powered Forward Communities. That's a $2 billion grant that was awarded to Rewire America. Doesn't that sound familiar? We have a partnership with them. Habitat for Humanity. Every community has a Habitat for Humanity. And so they're working, there's a coalition called Power Forward Community between Rewire America, Habitat for Humanity, and United Way. Again, every community has United Way chapters. They're working on opportunities to deploy a total of $100 billion in community-based initiatives and investments as part of a financing program for affordable housing, of which means things, well, we're talking about affordable housing means things that are efficient and can be electrified from a affordable housing perspective, working and supporting with local governments and community-based organizations, and to be able to finance that. The second one that's out there is the Opportunity Finance Network. That's what they call CDFIs, Community Development Finance Institutions. And there's a partnership of over 400 of them in many of the cities that we all live in. And they're going to bring $2.29 billion of federal funding with another $42 billion in assets that can, again, be leveraged at the community level for affordable financing for building electrification and efficiency and clean energy transition as well. Go to the next. So the last thing I wanted to tell you that was hot off the press today, just announced the $7 billion Solar for All. That means they're going to be looking to be able to put solar on over 900,000 low-income households across a total of, I think, around 60 announcements. They're in most of the states. Not all the states applied, but most of them had either applied or a nonprofit applied in that behalf. There's a link in there with who got the awards so that you can look in your state to see either if you're going to work with your state energy office that might have gotten that award, or whether it's a coalition like in Georgia. The Georgia Environmental Finance didn't get it, but a community-based coalition, Georgia Bright, did get it. And it gives you opportunities of who you can work with to work with both weatherization, electrification, and then solar deployment for distributed DERs, distributed energy resources, in low-income communities. Tomorrow, there'll be a Solar for All webinar that you can register for. So these are the types of resources you'll find in the resource section of the toolkit that will be working to kind of keep up to date as we go and identify those opportunities and be able to make some linkages and connections. Go to the next. So this one really wasn't mine. I think this was you and Michael were talking about this. I don't know if you wanted to pick up on this one, or is this just still a piece of work, piece of art in work?
Art in progress.
Art in progress.
I think it falls in that category, unless Michael, you have anything to note about it.
No, definitely.
Okay.
Yeah,
sorry, we should not have included this.
Yeah. So I think we're now ready.
Yep,
yeah, and I don't
continue ahead. Next slide.
Yep, continue ahead.
Next.
Yep.
Next slide, Mark. Okay, there you go. And now we'll hand the microphone to Mark and take it away.
Great. So thank you. We're going to shift gears here, as Pete mentioned at the beginning. The next section is going to talk about a presentation template that we put together. It's a starting point for you. It's not necessarily something you have to use, but it's at least to get you thinking about things that you might want to consider. And you're going to, when making presentations, so you're going to want to adapt it to your, specific situation and audience. You're going to want to tailor it to your own needs with the data that is most relevant in your community, in the audience you're presenting to. A couple of points on how to use the deck. So feel free to completely adapt it to your needs, add or delete bullets, or remove slides or hide slides as you feel is appropriate. You'll see throughout the presentation that there are red brackets, and those are intended to be filled with the information that's specific to your particular presentation. And then there are notes you'll see shortly here. There are like yellow sticky notes on certain slides that should be deleted before you use the presentation. And I will mention that up front, the presentation is pretty heavy on electrification over natural gas. Now, there's a number of areas in the country that are already pretty much electrified for heating and water heating. So this may not be, the tone of this may not be exactly right for those areas. So, you probably want to maybe select sections out of this and then adapt it to what you're trying to accomplish. So I'm not going to give the presentation. I'm going to do basically a flyover. There's 5 different sections: the motivation and the asks for building electrification, the use and hazards of natural gas, how to electrify buildings, funding sources for electrification, and lessons learned from adoption of the ordinances. So those are the main sections, and it's about 30 slides in total. And right away is our first example where the red brackets is your city, and that you would fill in with, with your region, your town, or your city. And you should feel free. I mean, this slide says eliminating fossil fuels from the buildings we live and work in. This is adapted from a presentation that was developed by San Diego Building Electrification Coalition. This is the tagline that they're focusing on in presenting locally. Your purpose may be different, so feel free to adapt the tagline also. Last time we talked about the importance of coalitions and building coalitions. This whole series is about that. This would be a page where you would put your logos of your coalition members. So, you know, as we talked about, the more logos, the better, the more powerful your coalition. The SDBEC has this slide now has 40 logos on it, and it gets a lot of attentions. We recently met with the city of San Diego on some of the implementation programs that they are pursuing. And they told us with the number of members that we have, you were definitely a stakeholder, that they're going to be coming back to every time they are pursuing electrification programs. So it really does make a difference as you build out your coalitions to put your logos there. So the other thing we recommend is also having a slide up front saying, you know, what it is you are seeking. You know, if you are, you know, this is an example of what we're looking for locally here in San Diego: all electric for new construction, all electric retrofits for municipal buildings, all electric retrofits, you know, for everyone, you know, all buildings. That may not be what that may not reflect the scope of what you're pursuing. It may not be, you know, the purpose for your meeting with a city council or a school district. You know, so feel free to modify this and adapt it, but we do recommend at least stating up front what it is you are seeking. So I'm going to now go over the kind of the major sections, and we're going to see if this works. I'm going to go into grid view. So these are the first section here are 3 slides covering the motivations for, the definition of, and the benefits from building electrification. The red text would be, again, the red text would be modified for your state's or your local area, well, your state's specifics on that slide. And you will see this is an example of the yellow stickies that are there. And that EIA data you will see throughout this presentation. There's a link there, and it has a huge amount of data, state by state, all kinds of topics from, you know, carbon emissions to, you know, electrification status throughout the U.S. So it's really a great resource to draw upon, and you will want to look to that to kind of tailor the presentation as you go through it. So the next section goes heavily into natural gas. So these 5 slides includes a variety of messages about gas, about stopping the buildings of new pipelines. If oops, there's even more here. Building new pipelines, and use of gas in all the built environments. Again, these are information that you probably want to tailor to your particular state. There's highlighting California here. But you can get this data from that EIA data and tailor it to your local region. Also talks about use of gas in the built environment, safety risks, indoor health risks, and especially for children. I mean, we all know that there's been a lot of discussion about that. And again, these are example slides. Feel free to add or delete and modify for your needs. The third section is again 3 slides that talks about where and how to electrify, the cost benefits of which you should verify in your region. This is tailored to California, but even you're relative to California, the benefits of electrifying in your area may be even greater. This slide gets very specific on kind of what to electrify. Basically, I think we all know space heating and water heating are nearly 90% of the benefits of electrification, in terms of eliminating gas, carbon contributing gas. All of these are based on national averages. And this third slide here shows city, state, and federal commitments that are already well known or documented that to building electrification. So again, keep an eye on that and update it. And we'll keep an eye on it and update it periodically also. This fourth section is just a couple of slides. Again, this is related to the funding. What Jay just presented a few minutes ago is probably more up to date than this. This is a bit more, targeted for if you're talking to a city council or a board of supervisors about what may be available in, just from the IRA to residents in general. Certainly the state and federal building electrification initiatives, I'd recommend drawing upon what Jay was just talking about and using that information. And then the last section here is a kind of what have we learned from recent ordinances. So it's examples, it's lessons learned. If you're talking to a city council, you may get a question, who else is doing this? What are they doing? What are you hearing back? What's the pushback? And this is intended to address that. Again, keep it in, maybe want to be a backup slide if that's not something you want to talk about up front. But we always at CCL we know there can be a lot of resistance, and we've learned over the years how to deal with that resistance. We are experts on overcoming resistance. So that's the kind of the quick flyover of the slide deck. There's a few backup slides here I won't go over now. Again, as Pete mentioned and Jay mentioned, these are all going to be in the resource toolbox, the resource toolkit folder that is on that we'll be sending the link out after the meeting, and you will have access to the slides and everything that you're seeing today. I'm going to now kind of move on quickly to reach codes. It's a whole different topic. So what is a reach code? Basically it's a local building code that goes beyond the requirements set by your state. It looks at areas like energy efficiency or environmental impact or safety. It can address specific local needs. So, that can range from reducing greenhouse gas emissions or promoting water conservation. You may see benefits from reducing environmental impact, lowering energy bills, even job creation. And this is an area that the legal landscape is changing quite quickly. So I recommend that you kind of double check what's going on. There's a whole, I think there's now the Supreme Court case that might be coming up that could affect this again. So, but again, we have, using that presentation that I just went through in San Diego, we have been pushing for reach codes, and we have several cities that have been motivated to adopt them locally here. And they're on the books, and they are being implemented. I put this up mainly to kind of show you the spectrum of the kind of reach codes, similar to what I mentioned a minute ago. But perhaps the most important item on this page is this link at the bottom, localenergycodes.com. It gives you what codes are being implemented by region and by type across the country. There may be codes like this being implemented already in your area or in a neighboring community. I really encourage you to go look there. It's very well done site, easy to put filters on, navigate to the the specific things you might be looking for. And the last thing that I will mention is examples of reach codes that you will find in that folder. So there, the first resource at the top provides a great overview of reach codes across the country, examples of those, in addition to the ones that you can filter for at Local Energy Codes. The other reach code examples, and this has actual implementation language here. Some are for all electric in new construction. Some are in existing buildings. There's one on exceptions. So reach codes frequently have they reach. So there may be locally there may be someone who says, we like the reach code, but it shouldn't cover these kinds of buildings, or it shouldn't cover this industry in our area. So that's what these exceptions are about. And these reach code examples we've tried to put in priority order for your convenience, but hopefully you can look at them, get a feel for them, and they'll be useful to you. So with that, I move on to ordinances.
Okay. Hi all, good to be with you. Happy Earth Day. Turning now to what we've put in the resource toolkit that we keep alluding to regarding sample ordinances. And we've gathered together a number of examples of municipal ordinances that go beyond building codes or even reach codes. These are ordinances that may be of use to you as you're thinking about how to encourage electrification. So they include, if you go to the first slide, Mark, sorry. They include examples that fall sort of neatly into one of the first four categories on this slide. And then, of course, we have the miscellaneous bucket where Pete and I haven't sorted through it yet. And then there'll be other ones that we're discovering all the time, and we'll keep adding to the resource toolkit under sample municipal ordinances. Next slide. The links under each of the bullets on the following two slides provide a lot more information on each of these examples, which we don't have all the time to talk about right now. But some examples of, for example, we have performance standards, and some examples of performance standards include this Zero Electric Performance Index, or ZEPI, kind of a nifty name. ZEPI it's a metric for calculating commercial building energy performance that represents a fundamental shift in that it is not using a model of predicted performance. It's using an actual performance and measuring against the scale from zero net energy to the average for the building set, I think, in 2000 or 2002. So the link below that is to the New Buildings Institute, where you can learn more about that tool, which could be very useful in some of your communities. Passive House is a green building energy standard that ensures buildings consume minimal amounts of energy. There's a link there to the Passive House Network. It's a group that's produced a number of reports on this, so that's a good resource. Indoor state policy approaches or examples of indoor quality and occupant health include state policy approaches for gas stove pollution. If you were to click on the link there, it would take you to presentation on the entire landscape of potential policy approaches available for state governments to limit the indoor pollution associated with gas burning appliances. Go to the next slide. Examples of government buildings. What we mean by that is, for example, a model government zero emissions building policy released by the New Buildings Institute. It provides kind of plug and play language for jurisdictions that are considering taking a lead by example approach. So if you want to look at policies designed to address government buildings, and if that's appropriate for what you're dealing with in your jurisdiction, then you'd want to take a look at that way. In the category of tenants' rights, Change Lab Solutions developed a model ordinance on proactive rental inspection, or PRI, that can help localities who are interested in increasing compliance with laws that protect residents' health and well-being. So sort of using the tenants' rights inspection code to come in and potentially set, again, limits on indoor air quality and indoor pollution. Overall, I mentioned there's a bunch of stuff in there, but for one example of the miscellaneous items we have in that folder is a Buildings Decarbonization Coalition database of all the zero emission building ordinances around the country. Next slide, please, Mark. This is a crowded slide, and I'll just say it's a interesting and thorough resource compiled by Actera, which is a Palo Alto-based nonprofit that develops local solutions for a healthy planet, and includes a lot of recommendations for what county elected officials can do right now to accelerate decarbonization in their jurisdiction. So there's a lot of good information there that may be useful to you. Next slide, please. Just to kind of wrap up here, in 2019, Berkeley passed the nation-leading gas ban, and 100 U.S. cities and the state of Washington followed suit. However, as maybe most of you or many of you know, in April of 2023, the gas ban was overturned by the 9th U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals. Go to the next slide. Between 2020 and through 2023, which were the 4 years leading up to the Berkeley decision by the court, 24 states passed laws that preempted gas bans in new buildings. So anticipated that those that were seeking gas bans, and they preempted those. In response, rather than outright gas bans, a number of states and cities are now pursuing other pathways, like the ones we were just talking about, to incentivize electrification, and like the ones Jay was talking about. So as previously discussed, performance standards is one of those approaches. I don't think we have time now, but there's some interesting examples of cities in California, San Luis Obispo, San Diego. There were a few more that did or rescinded their ban that they had already put on, or took it off the books, and instead are using a performance measure that incentivizes new buildings to include additional electric appliances, effectively making them more energy efficient than required by the state. So kind of reaching beyond what the state's requiring, and then saying that'll stay in place until the ban is lifted, or until the courts, if and when the courts repeal the language that the anti-gas ban language, then their gas ban would go back into place. So there's some creative ways that everybody's trying to get creative now in terms of how to get to the same outcome, given what the court decided in the Berkeley case. And I'll turn it over to you, Pete, on that.
All right, super. Thanks very much, Michael and everybody. And I'm going to move pretty quickly. We're a little over our time budget, and I want to leave time for Q&A. So this section of the resource toolkit is about school districts. Next. And first off, why bother with school districts? Why focus on student-led? And what should we ask? In a nutshell, two reasons. Students are impacted. They are our future and the entire reason schools exist. Students are inspiring. And it's been really phenomenal watching some of the things go on around the country. There are kind of three levels of commitment that a school district can make. First and lowest level is a resolution, kind of the simplest and most common. It's 2 or 3 or 5 pages, and it's just a standard resolution, whereas, therefore, be it resolved. And mostly it's aspirational, but it sets a goal. Next level is a policy, and that can be, a few pages or 20 or 40 pages. But this is a directive from the school board to staff saying you shall do A, B, and C, or should X, Y, and Z, et cetera. And finally, there are a handful of school districts that have climate action plans, dozens or hundreds of pages. Next. All right. Personal experience here in Long Beach, California. Joining us, Los Angeles, the second largest school district in the country. In 2019, the board passed a resolution, and so the Long Beach school kids, 70,000 students versus 400 and some, said, oh, well, if our big cousin to the north can get a resolution, we should be able to also. But they tried for 3 years, and it was very challenging for the school board to understand what this was, because they didn't understand, well, what is climate change? How do you solve it? And all that. And so the resolution asked the school board to commit to 100% clean renewable energy in its electricity sector by 2030, and then in heating, ventilating, air conditioning, cooking, and transport by 2040. Well, you see in the orange there, the supply side goal of committing to clean energy supply is something that school districts really have very little control over. You can put up some solar, but fundamentally, we're all of us, businesses, school districts, residents, are very dependent on the electric grid. And that is proceeding at its own pace, and it's rapid, thank goodness. But the green bullets paragraph down at the bottom reminds us of what Rewiring America tells us. If all you do is, when machines in your school district's inventory or any other type of business enterprise, when your machines that are powered by fossil approach their end of life, replace them with an electric machine. And all of a sudden, it made crystal clear sense. They could see, oh, you mean we've already got a plan for this? It's called our recapitalization budget. Cool. And within 2 months, they passed a policy. Next. And this is another view of the same thing, but it's already within a few months, this concept made it into the facilities master plan. And the school board was just very, very supportive. Next. So what do we have in the resource toolkit about school districts? We've got talking points like what I just described, suggestions for how to go about providing public comment. We've got a template for a resolution. There's a couple of different school campaigns out there. Rewiring America has one, and other entities that we work with and respect, New Buildings Institute, Rocky Mountain Institute, and others. We've got an overview deck, and there's everybody's favorite is a deck with Show Me the Money in the IRA for schools. Next. A handful of examples of schools that CCL's Great School Electrification Challenge is aware of around the country. And I think there are many more, but there's some on here that have passed resolutions, a few have passed policies, and a few have passed sustainability plans. Next slide. And this was just partly curiosity, but it tells us some meaningful things. This is according to the authoritative source Wikipedia. This is the 40 largest U.S. school districts. They have a list of 120, and I just wanted to put something on one side. It's not critical which districts really for this discussion, but essentially these 40 and 100 largest districts in the country represent a whole bunch of the students and population, and that gives us reach to their families, to the city councils, and everything else. So that's excellent. There should also be a bunch of other bright green highlights on here, but I didn't have time to go through and check each of these school districts individually. So I only highlighted the ones that I know of from our previous work, but this will be something I'll add later. Next slide. And here's one of the slides in that show me the money that I mentioned. And these are different programs from the IRA to help schools. Next. And that is it. So Mark, I think that's it for the slide deck, and we can stop sharing and go to Q&A. So with that, everybody feel free to unmute and chime in. I guess we should raise our hands. We've got 30, so we want to not step on each other. I might start. There were at least 3 questions that I picked up in the chat and have partially been answered in the chat, but I wanted to give an opportunity to raise them up to get us going. Jackie Armstrong asked, Jay, as you go through these general descriptions of funding, can you give an illustrative example of how a small community might access these funds? And Jay basically said, yeah, I could do that, but not in this short a time, but call me. But Jay, do you want to try to give 30 seconds on that?
Yeah, I think there's many examples of, either individual organizations or small coalitions that are forming and done that. I mean, one of the easy examples is, just the San Diego, right? That CCL was among a number of other interest groups that came to actually influence, I think it was the county under their climate action plan to put in certain priorities. And I think they, as a coalition, got and worked with the local entity to apply for 70 million in building efficiency and electrification funding as part of the implementation funds, of which CCL was a supporting piece on that. So yeah.
Jay, and one, I think, clarification, and Jackie, tell me if I'm wrong here. I think Jackie was asking more about what's the process to apply? Where do I go find the IRS Form 1040 to apply for?
It doesn't work that way. That is the part that takes, you have to, just like all good government grants, it requires a level of sophistication, capacity. That's why they have capacity building and technical assistance grants. That's why you have to form coalitions, because not one entity on its own may be able to do that, but an entity in partnership with the local government can.
Okay.
And that's kind of the where it's going.
Thank you, Pete. Thank you, Pete. Thank you, Jay, both of you, for that kind of prompt for a head start. So it sounds as if you're from a tiny little rural community in Iowa, the first step is to really start building the coalitions. And then once they're together, but it's likely that no one in the school district or the local electrical co-op or the small grain businesses in town are going to have expertise in grant writing capabilities to get started. I guess that was my frustration.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
And Jackie, I would tell you, you might not need to do that, because just look at all the funding. You can look in the state of Iowa for the Solar for All, find out who's getting that funding. Bring together a couple of folks in your community saying, hey, we can link you to folks that can take advantage of solar deployment, and just be a connector and work with your city to make that happen. I mean, that's the other part of that. It isn't like you have to directly apply. Some of this funding's already out there. You just got to funnel it into your community. Number 2 would be, particularly for small rural communities, if you don't already, look up USDA, U.S. Department of Agriculture, rural communities. Each state has a state director. There are area managers. They've got a whole pile of money from anything from affordable housing to building electrification, that they're bringing those resources to the table. And sometimes all it takes is a phone call.
All right, very good. Thank you. Hey, we've got about 8 minutes, 9 minutes left. And just like any good CCL shared Zoom line, this one has another call coming in at the top of the hour, and it's my chapter's core leader team. So we'll see some more folks jumping on in a few minutes, and so we'll have to wrap up. I see Sam, your hand, but before I do let me check in with Alex Amonette. She had in the chat question that if she mentions upgrading buildings to electrify them, people say we can't afford it and we can't pay any more property taxes. How do we respond? And she mentions that these are farmers, ranchers, and people wedded to the coal and gas industries. And my reply in chat was that in North Carolina, very similar sort of cultural phenomenon. Our CCL state coordinator and group leader there, Ellen Van Velsor, described on a recent call like this that she's found success engaging these small rural towns, talking about clean energy, and starting off early with a description of the IRA and other incentives and finding something specific that could help her community. So Alex, I don't know if that was helpful or if you want to finesse that a little more.
Yeah, no, that's very helpful, and I'll follow up with those folks.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, Montana people are against the IRA, unfortunately.
Of course, because they're continually told it's evil. Anyway, but
Well,
okay.
you know,
What
once they
else do
put a
we have for
solar
other-
battery on their house and they're saving money, they might change their mind.
Yeah, yeah. Sam, I see you put your hand down, but let's. What's your question?
Yeah, my question was in relation to the information talked about in the school districts or the school electrification. As someone who is looking into doing the school electrification challenge, doing something like that when I inevitably get into Pensacola State College or something like that in a few months. What are some extra material or extra things to consider when jumping into it?
When jumping into talking to one of these, I think the two major points I would make are first, from our National Youth Action Team, visit their page, and I can drop a link in the chat, but it's in the deck that I've already linked. But CCL's National Youth Action Team has a program ongoing called the Great School Electrification Challenge. They are starting their second year of that, and they focus on making sure you have student-led teams with a CCL mentor or advisor, but helping the students engage the adult leaders. And it's been successful in a lot of ways. The second thing that I think is critical is the part that I highlighted about rewiring America's approach of linking it to the recapitalization budget and cycle. It was like a 1,000,000-watt light bulb went over the senior executive's head when I described that. In 3 minutes, he went from 3 years of opposition to allowing a resolution to be upgraded to a policy in 2 months.
Hey,
Phenomenal.
Pete, one other thing is always remember that ultimately their mission is to educate kids. So you always have to keep in mind, you're impacting better air quality for kids. You're teaching kids on STEM and education and workforce development. You're integrating this within curriculum. So you really, beyond just the push through the school boards, also be thinking about how to talk to educators in the context of you're helping them meet their mission by making kids helping kids learn easier in a healthier setting.
Sam, did that help or did I miss the mark?
I think my question was more like when it goes around to, because in reference to the resolutions and policy and stuff, is how much what are some things to consider if a student or a group of students are making a resolution? What are some extra things to consider when writing those?
Gotcha. There is some detail in the resource toolkit in the template that we have, but I would say the high level things are you want You want to get a commitment to phasing out fossil powered machines as they reach their end of life. That is the single most important thing you can do. Beyond that, and that group of machines includes transport, so school buses, passenger vehicles, and trucks that the district uses. But so that's the single most important thing. Beyond that, try to minimize weasel wording, but acknowledge that everybody's going to have some weasel wording in there because the market isn't completely developed yet. And then focus next on probably the next most interesting thing and substantive thing to the kids, and interesting to the kids and substantive to emissions, is management of waste, and especially organic waste from meals. There's state laws addressing that in California, very difficult to achieve. But we have to repeat what we have spent several decades achieving with getting people used to recycling of plastics and papers and metals, but now do that for organic waste and put in place systems that are not rigged like the plastics recycling piece is. Pardon my cynicism. Does that help?
I would say, yeah, that's some good things to consider.
Yeah,
Awesome.
Sam, and I'll leave you with one other thing. We had third and fifth graders do this in 12 elementary schools across 146 districts, and they were able to cause a 40% drop in food waste and over that 12 pilot school system within 3 months that was deployed countywide. So it's possible to do.
All right. Got a couple minutes left. Let's keep it going. Everybody's shy. Yeah, Dan?
Yeah, I had one other motive for school districts is imagine you're in high school or middle school and you convince your school to put up solar panels. You would feel an incredible empowerment that would stay with you for the rest of your life.
Yes. Yeah. The students that have had success in any way in these are just phenomenally empowered. And they were already phenomenally motivated and talented to achieve what they did in engaging. But yeah, really helpful. All right. Well, fantastic. I think at this point, I'll go ahead and close the recording, and